because it's recording and it's showing live on top.
Okay. If it's showing live, we're live. So let's not say anything embarrassing.
Okay, so this is a series of events. Hi guys, I'm hoping you're on here. Welcome to one of our first episodes to Beyond the Current Situation. Nothing brings me more pleasure than to announce my guest. I'm so excited to have Eric here with us. He has been such a personal inspiration to me, and I know that you are about to receive a very powerful download with us today. Eric is an internationally recognized business speaker, film producer, a serial entrepreneur. He is also the founder of WildFit and the creator of both Inception Marketing and Freedom Business, which is a business ownership methodology that empowers you to own your own business that doesn't own you. Need I say more? Eric is just one of those amazing humans. So without further ado, welcome, Eric. It's good to have you here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's always fun to have a fun chat.
It is. It's been a series of events. Quick story is about an hour ago, suddenly I went to just log on, check the lighting, and my laptop was dead. This never happens. I call up my IT guy, my go-to man. I says, hey, Joey, shout out to Joey. I said, hey, how you doing? He goes, I'm busy. What do you want? I was like, okay, well, I have to be on, kind of want to log in like now, and my laptop's dead. He goes, what do you want me to do? I go, oh, come on, Joey, give me some pointers. Anyway, it's like 20 minutes later, I call him back. Yeah, it's not, I can't get it on, Joey. It was crazy. I had to take the battery out, put it back in. Here we are. So it's nuts. In fact,
one of the things that we teach at our Speaker Nation program is that stuff's going to happen, like when you're performing live or you're on stage or what have you. And your first goal is to make sure nobody knows. And then your second goal is to somehow use it to improve the show. And no kidding, today we saw this really cool story that we shared about this woman who was getting ready to do a piano concert, like a solo piano concert in a hall with all these people, but one of the pedals wouldn't work. And so she couldn't do it. So she started playing this song that didn't require the pedals quite the same way. And they wheeled the piano over to the lever floor. And then she sits down, and then the piano and her drift down below the stage. She keeps playing, moves to the other piano, brings the piano up, comes up through the stage again, and carries on doing the concert. And I was like, that's professional.
I love it. It's so true. It brings me back to when I was a child, because I was raised, a dancer, and I was on stage and I'm tapping away, and there goes my tap shoe right off. And it was not, I wasn't with a group of people. It was a solo of all things. And I just kept tapping and smiling with one tap on and one tap off. This is life, right?
Yeah.
So
show must go on.
Much like life situations, which is exactly why I really wanted to give back with this podcast. Like, how do we really navigate through any little thing that goes on? I do, though, Eric, I do have one question to ask you. I must ask before we
You have an entire interview booked and you have one question?
I have one first question.
I'm kidding.
I have one first question that I must ask. I've watched your talks on the internet, mostly with you on the stages at Mind Valley, and by the way, I've benefited from them tremendously, I must say. But my one question to you right now, before we get started, is: are you having this conversation right now barefoot?
I may be. Barefoot, bare leg. I've been home for 8 weeks. I put on a pair of sandals the other day so I could cross the street, because I had to go get some coconuts to make a smoothie. But
love it.
No, I haven't worn shoes in 2 months.
When I first saw you, I was like, this guy's on stage barefoot. And seriously, and I said, I like him. I like this guy.
You know what's really funny about that? What's really funny about that is that the particular event that I think you're probably, because there's only one or two where I'm barefoot on the stage, but it's like, it's a retreat. It's a party retreat type event, and so it's very much like that. But what cracks me up is all the internet trolls. Like there's one video of mine about public speaking, funny enough, and it was a spontaneous talk, a 3-hour spontaneous talk at a Mind Valley event in Croatia. Very casual summer camp type thing at Mind Valley University. Very fun. But I was kind of asked to do this talk. I didn't really think much of it. I just threw on a shirt, didn't fix my hair, nothing. Go out, do this 3-hour talk. Well, I don't know they're filming it. I didn't realize. And then they put it online. It's now had 1 million views, but I'm dressed bad. And 90% of the comments are like, this really changed my life. This really helped me think about speaking, 90%. But there's these trolls. You don't even know how to dress properly. And what are you doing barefoot?
So true. It's so true. It's so funny. You know what? I'm actually, even previous to when I saw you, I just read a little blurb, or I think you said something on one of your talks. I am intrigued about your upbringing. You were born in South Africa. Tell us about that and what life situations led you or brought you to Canada.
My family were what they in South Africa refer to as voortrekkers, like the original European settlers into South Africa. And so we've been there for a very, very long time. And, you know, something that I've really observed about racism is that you almost can't blame each generation. I'll give you a better example. My grandmother's dog, this little, one of these little useless, noisy little things, but it was not a nice dog, but you know what? It was really terrible to Africans. It was really bad to Black people. It would yell at them and bark at them and yell at it. But I realized it wasn't the dog's fault, right? The dog was just picking up what my grandparents were putting down. It's not the dog's fault. But then if it's not the dog's fault, is it even my grandparents' fault? Because they were raised that way. I mean, nobody taught them any differently. And I have always been incredibly and immensely proud that my parents broke that my parents somehow, I don't know if it was listening to the Beatles or smoking weed in the 60s, but something changed them. And they were absolutely against what was going on in South Africa. They were supporting the ANC. And between that and, some other issues, they chose to leave South Africa, and we ended up going to Canada. And so I mostly grew up in Canada and was educated in Canada. Although I really do regard myself as African. I have a stronger sense of African identity than I do Canadian, but I think part of that has to do with I left Canada in my early 20s. So I spent a few adult years in Canada, and I haven't been back except for the occasional visit. So I am Canadian, but I feel very much South African as well.
Oh, okay. Because I've been actually even telling myself and others, I said, he's South African. Yeah, because I remembered you mentioning, those days. Yeah. What was your upbringing like?
It was ideal. I had an ideal upbringing. And by that, what I mean is that it was full of all the pain and difficulty and struggle that a great upbringing is, that prepares you for what's coming next. My dad's a truly brilliant man, and that's difficult, by the way, as a child. Let me just tell you right now. And, but on top of that, he was, as many very brilliant people are, he was dealing with substance problems, drugs and alcohol. And so I grew up with a lot of that stuff, alcoholism and unpredictable behavior, and divorced before I got to my teens and that sort of thing. And my parents living on opposite sides of Canada, it's a big country. So when you got to go visit dad on that side and mom on this side, you're talking about basically the equivalent of a transatlantic flight every time you want to go see a parent. And, but at the same time, my parents are both amazing people. I don't know, like my dad was this weird combination as I grew up of Indiana Jones and Crocodile Dundee with a drinking problem. So, I consider myself really fortunate that I went through what I went through, including the things that, I would not necessarily want my children to go through. But, it's one of the weird dichotomy of parenthood. I am grateful that those things happen to me to prepare me for life, but I would not let them happen to my children.
Yeah, no, totally. I say that in my book, Truth to Triumph. It's like everything that's gone on in the past has really molded me and made me, who I am and what I stand for and what I'm able to give back today. It's totally, it's just, it's molding you. And not that you want anyone else to go through it, like I almost was going to name my book, Don't Let This Happen to You. But I said, no, let me be a little more serious about it. But I could definitely resonate, the world calls it dysfunction, but I call it normal because, show me anyone in this world that does not have something going on, that typically people will call dysfunctional, but I feel that this is norm.
Yeah, like easy childhood, difficult life.
Yeah.
I really feel like that. The easier your childhood is, the tougher life's going to be. I mean, I remember one day having this striking experience where it's like I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Eastern Canada. And we lived in what I would best describe as lower middle class. In other words, we were poor, but we did the best we could to live a middle class life in the middle of that. And, you know, we had the conversations. I remember my parents sitting me down one day and telling me we didn't have enough money for Christmas. So we just weren't going to do that, you know, and then somehow they managed to, probably with the help of the magnanimous people at Visa, they figured out how to have some Christmas that year. But, you know, when I moved back to Halifax in my mid-20s, I lived there for a year in my mid-20s because I was preparing for a transfer to Europe. And so I was making really good money. I drove a really nice car. You know, it was I was living in a very different life than my parents were living in when we lived there. So I go to Halifax and all of a sudden I can eat at restaurants that like we used to just walk by and go, I wonder what it's like in there, you know? And now I'm like living this life where I can get a table anytime and it's a totally different life. But one day I'm walking in the mall and I bump into this guy, and he was like the primo alpha male in high school. You know, sure, he was captain of this or other team, and his family were incredibly wealthy, and they lived in the biggest house, and he always had a nice car, and you know, he always had the girls, and it looked really easy. And you know, he recognized me, which is amazing to me because in high school I had hair past my shoulders, and so he walked up and he goes, "Hey, Eric!" Hadn't seen me in all these years, and we weren't even really friends in high school. I wouldn't have thought that he even knew who I was, you know, but he did. And, you know, so we start talking and he's like, "Oh, you've been away. I haven't seen you around the town," and, you know, whatever. And then he's like, he goes, "Well, do you know of any jobs out there?" And it just hit me like, wow, to be, you know, 26 years old and with an education, with very wealthy parents and all the advantages in the world. And he's out there looking for a job in the mall. And,
yeah.
And I wonder if that isn't just that high school was just too easy.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting. And just even the involvement that maybe you have with your parents or not. Is that your little baby girl?
No, I wish it was. It's Instagram. I thought
Oh.
I sometimes do this with, well, maybe she's watching, but I sometimes, you know, when I'm doing interviews, I'll sometimes just throw Instagram on a live in the meantime. So I point to, they've seen you. They know who you are.
I love, thank you. A little plug. Thank you. I could definitely resonate though with your story. And I think everyone can, because we all have a story. I've had a less than desirable childhood and upbringing myself, would never change it. That's why I'm here today. But so imagine that just for a moment. You went back in time when you were growing up, and suddenly a global pandemic comes along, much like this one that we're in today, right? I have a good one. Since you were a film producer, I'm going to pose this question this way. So in that imagination, let's say that you were looking down at that situation. As if it were a scene in a movie, in a film. What would you say to those parents, those grandparents, that child, or those children that are suddenly in this lockdown, in an already turbulent situation, with not even school or a friend or a home to go to as a refuge?
Yeah, you know, I've actually spoken about this a number of times. You know, on our Thrive Time show, I've interviewed, you know, Shelley Lefkoe, Dr. Shafali, Amber Trueblood, John Gray on parenting and relationships, and I'll share with you what I shared with them, and I stand by it, and I think they would agree 100%. Probably had the thought on their own, but it works like this. I believe that the job of every parent and grandparent out there right now is to simply get through this situation in such a way that their children look back on it as a fun time. You know, that their children look back on this time and go, "Oh yeah, the pandemic, wasn't that time we took a few months off school and we spent a lot of time at home and we learned to do fun stuff and we finger painted, and yeah, I remember that." That's how I want kids to look back at it. I want kids to look back and go, "Oh yeah, the lockdown, right? That was like the super long summer vacation where we couldn't leave the house."
Right.
Rather than the other version, which I know is also going to happen. And that is the version where we have a bunch of socially impacted, germophobic, fear-based children that come out of this. And I suspect that that's going to be what happened, because you see, you know, children are learning about the world from their parents' reactions to things, and not just simply even what they do, but just the way they react, you know. So if a cockroach comes into the room and you're like, ah, would have just taught your child about the cockroach, right? I mean, it's just harmless. You can't do a damn thing to you, but you've just reacted in a way that tells that child that the cockroaches are like more dangerous than a rattlesnake. Like, and so they learn. And so I think that there are cases that I've seen with my own eyes, and I've also seen on videos, where parents are freaking their kids out. You know, they're like, oh, don't get so close to those kids. And so when the lockdown eases and then there's going to, and I'm telling you, there's going to be second waves. I mean, we're already starting to see it, and parents are going to have that reaction again. And what I think we have to remember about children is that they are constantly and continually making their rules for the way the world works. And one of the ways they're making up those rules is based on our responses, our behaviors, and our reactions to things. And so the more calm and steady and reasoned we are about this whole approach, the more likely it is that they could look back upon this time with a sense of positive nostalgia and joy. Oh yeah, the lockdown, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting because, you know, when we're parenting, when it's not a lockdown, you know, many times, you know, I usually coach people where they're multitasking. Oh yeah, we're doing homework. No, you're not. You're texting your girlfriend, you're cooking dinner, your husband's asking you questions in the other room, and your child is sitting 2 feet away on the kitchen counter, you know, and you think you're doing homework. So what I suggest to a lot of parents is this is a great time to really kind of home in and really, really spend that quality time, because there's no escape with with all the distractions. I'm going to call them distractions in life, because really there's no escape, you know?
Yeah.
And so this is a great time to actually have fun. And to your point, I mean, just let them feel safe and happy, right? And everything's going to be fine, right? Children, they just want to feel secure and happy, yeah, and loved.
You know, one of my favorite stories, and I'm just grateful that I knew to do this, and I only knew to do it because there are people out there sharing strategies about parenting. But my little girl and I were out for a walk on the beach here one day, and a dog came along, and she loves dogs. Frankly, if it moves, she loves it, except for BB-8. She's not sure about BB-8 from Star Wars, the love and hate relationship there. But everything else that moves, cockroaches, dogs, doesn't matter. She loves them. And so this one dog came up and bit her. And it didn't break the skin, but it bruised her. It definitely came up red, and she's screaming and she's crying. And of course, I want to take her into the house and just look at it properly and clean it and make sure there's no issues. But as I'm in the house, I'm looking at this going, wow, I am at the precipice of two universes. I'm going to end up in a universe where I have a girl who's phobic of dogs, or I'm going to end up in a universe where I have a girl who's not. And what I do in the next 5 minutes is going to make a decision as to which universe I'm living in. And so I immediately picked her up, took her back outside. She didn't really want to go, but she didn't fight me on it. We went outside, and there are a number of the dogs locally that she knows very well, and because we go for walks all the time. And so I went and took her to all her favorite dogs, and she got to play with all her favorite dogs. And so suddenly that one memory is only a tiny percentage of the walk that day. Whereas had we stopped the walk at the bite and stopped the walk at the peak of upset, then we would have created a little mini PTSD type event for her, which may have scarred her. And I think that we need to think like that when it comes to the pandemic. We need to think like that when it comes to the way we talk about it. Like, here's a good example. Do not build false hope into your children that the lockdown is going to end anytime soon. You know, hope is a great thing, but false hope is dangerous. If you say to your kids, oh, it's going to be another 2-3 weeks, then they will take you literally, and they'll start thinking it's another 2 to 3 weeks. And then when it's not, you know, you've let them down, and you've hurt your credibility. Plus you've built their emotions up. You know, this is something I learned from Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. He said, hope would come along. They'd all think they're going to get rescued from Auschwitz, and they would survive. The people in the work camps, suddenly people would stop dying as often, and they would survive, and they'd get through to Christmas when they thought the Allied forces were going to liberate them. And then Allied forces didn't show up. And then as soon as Christmas is gone, people just start dying again. And it's like, and fast, because their hope had been inflated and then deflated. So somewhere we need to manage to keep emotions in a comfortable range of not over promising and over delivering, but equally not freaking out with fear.
Yeah, exactly. And dealing with those emotions. And, you know, I I love that you have a passion for studying human behavior in general and how you tie that knowledge into our behavior and habits with food. I love that. In fact, quick story, 20 years ago, I entered into the fitness world, the fitness industry, and I opened my first 3 franchises, and they were fitness clubs. And I had this heart to help others feel really great about themselves and get physically fit. But my real passion, actually at that time, was in learning about why and what we put into our bodies. Even before those physical attempts, to feel good and be fit. And I always felt that we need to consider what we're eating and why. Even at an early age, when I was 23, I was traveling as a showgirl, a dancer, and it seemed to me, we had to fit into those costumes that you got the audition, now you got to, you have this, costume that's built, that's really tailored every inch for you. That's where you have to stay. And so what I learned at that early age was it was really 80% what I ate. And so today, right? But today I see optimum health is really an integration of 3 things for me. What we eat physically, how we exercise love, and what we are feeding on spiritually. And, I'm more in tune at my age, and I'm not a spring chicken, to the importance of using, all 3 of those things. So I guess my question is, what do you feel brings optimum health and life longevity?
One of the, over the years, I've been trying to unlock both the sort of physical realities of health and then the psychological realities of health. And they are intertwined in a pretty inconvenient way. And what I mean by that is that, like we can do this. We can go, inflammation is causing most of the disease today. Okay, but what's causing the inflammation?
Yeah.
The lack of the right nutrition and the wrong food going in is causing the inflammation. Okay, so it must be about food. But wait a minute. What's causing us to eat the wrong food, right? Oh, our psychology. Okay, but what's causing our psychology to be depressed and difficult and making us want to eat that food? The food we're eating. Okay, but then why? So, there's this weird, like, multi-level chicken and egg conversation about where the transformation has to take place. So one of the places that we begin is that we begin with a core understanding of the fundamental needs of human beings. So there are some core and fundamental needs of human beings. And when we address those needs, interestingly enough, our psychology improves. And in general terms, we become happier and healthier, and everything just works better.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we break them down into, into the physical needs, the emotional needs, and the spiritual needs. And that's in order. What I mean is the physical needs come first, and and then you end up with the emotional needs are the next to be served. And then once you've handled that, then we can take a look and start working on the spiritual needs. The physical needs, though, when it comes to this time that we're in now, by far the most important, I figure. And in a sense, the metaphor here is you're about to do a long trip with your car, and don't you want to make sure that your car has all its physical needs met before you undertake that journey? Is the gas full? Do you have oil? Is the oil clean? All that kind of stuff. And so that's really where we try and fix that. Now, if I can do this, hold on, a little fancy tech. Hold on a second. I'll let you know if it works.
Okay. And while you're doing that,
you're not getting it, are you? That's
something is trying to come on from Prezi Video.
Okay, I guess that's not going to work.
That's okay.
Yeah, I hadn't planned to do it, so I guess it didn't integrate properly. But it doesn't matter. I was just gonna some cool slides I was gonna do.
Yeah, no, that would have been fine. I love the way I love what it just really aligns with exactly what I was saying, just in the way I look at things, with what you physically eat, how you're exercising love, heart, feelings, yeah, and then what you're feeding yourself spiritually. So this is fantastic. I love it. And don't you feel like when when you're thinking like right now in the pandemic, the very most important thing is what we're eating and putting into our bodies. But if you think about it also, if we're still really, really exercising that love, we're going to want to feed our bodies things that really serve our body best. We're going to want to eat healthy things. So am I right? Does that make sense?
It's a weird, that's kind of that issue of the relationship between what you're putting in your body and how you're feeling, and how you're feeling has everything to do with what you want to put in your body. So you've got this loop that's running all the time, and somewhere you've got to change that loop. But it's not, it's not just about food. When we look at the 8 physical needs of the body in order of urgency, the first one is air. And a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to that because they're like, well, I'm breathing anyway. But air is not really, first of all, it's not air you need, it's oxygen. And secondly, it's not just breathing, it's breathing in a way that communicates with your cells that you're safe. So deep breathing and slow breathing, because when you shallow breathe, that's called prey breathing. In other words, when you're breathing really shallow, it's to make sure that the lion can't see you or hear you. So you breathe shallow. So you produce cortisol. And when you breathe really deeply, you're just saying, I'm safe. You wouldn't breathe like that if there was a lion over there. You just wouldn't. And so, that's the first thing is air. And then there's water. And, long before we even think about food, our body is 80% water. Our muscle is all water. Our fat's we need water. And of course, one of the problems is that a lot of people are drinking stuff that isn't even water. Like they're drinking anti-water. They're drinking diuretics like soft drinks and coffee and stuff like that. That's not water. And so it's really important that people preemptively prevent dehydration rather than thinking of it the other way. It's like, I'll drink when I'm thirsty. It's too late. You got to drink before you're thirsty. And we kind of go through it. We got to have sleep. We got to have sunshine. We got to have energy, and not garbage energy. The quality of the energy we put in matters. I saw this woman the other day. She's like, oh, I like to clean the house and reward myself with a latte and a donut. And I'm like, oh my God, isn't that like going on a long drive and then pouring sugar into the gas tank? That's got to be a bad idea. And then of course we have to have movement. And what's happening all around the world right now is people are not satisfying these physical needs, and then they're not moving. So they're losing muscle density, they're losing bone mass. But here's the thing they don't really understand, because they kind of know that. They're like, oh yeah, my muscles might get weak, I can build them after. But the big thing is, and this is crazy, is our lymphatic system requires muscular contraction in order to move lymph around the system. Lymph cleanses everything. It doesn't have a pump like the heart or the diaphragm. It relied on our general need to move to pump itself around. And now people aren't moving all that much.
Right.
So we really got to take care of these needs. And the 8th need is physical touch. And for a lot of us, that's become difficult because some of us, like me, I'm on quarantine. I'm alone. I'm completely separated from I'm alone. Oh. And so that's interesting. And then there are also other people that are locked up with people and they're now irritated with them. Like I have these friends going, oh, Eric, you're so lucky to be locked up alone. And I'm like, no, I'm not, but grass is always greener.
Right. No, it's so true. It's so true. You talk about many people being malnourished. Love that. Tell me about that.
Well, there's 2 types of malnourished. There's the malnourished we're all very familiar with, and that's the starving to death malnourished, right? Like that's like, somebody doesn't have enough nutrients and they're starving to death, and that happens. Then there's another kind of malnourished, which is the malnourished that most of us are dealing with in the Western world. And that's the malnourished where we are suffering the lack of nutrients, not energy per se, but specific nutrients. And that's a major problem that's going on at the moment. I mean, that's a major, I would put to you that in America and around the world, we have populations that are vastly overfed calories and malnourished when it comes to non-energy nutrients. So just, in other words, this is an interesting take, right? But what I'm saying is that people are overeating energy and under-eating non-energy nutrients. So they're overeating in ways that are damaging their body and storing too much energy. This would be called weight gain or obesity. And then they're under-eating really important like nutritional constituents like, say, amino acids or vitamins or minerals or healthy fats. And so in a weird way, they're overeating and malnourished. So even though they might be quite overweight, they're actually truly starving to death.
Yeah. Wow. You talk about those emotional linkages, with food. And what I found was that there's there's more anyway, discussion about overeaters and very little about undereaters, if you will. And I feel that there is a gap there that desperately needs to be filled in. What would you say to those listeners who are challenged with anorexia?
Do you know, when we first started working, when we created our first 90-day program, one of the women that worked on our team had been in the like diet space before, and she had been dealing with like, you know, various food issues like anorexia, bulimia, and body issues and so on. And she was quite concerned that we were just creating this kind of like this product and not addressing those concerns directly head on. And my answer to her was, well, we're not going after that market right now. Like, our primary market right now is your average person who wants increased energy, you know, wants to lose weight, wants to gain weight, wants better fertility, wants better sex drive, wants clearer mental thinking. Listen, we're not going after these deep-seated psychological issues. And so we proceeded. But then we started getting feedback from clients, because guess what? If people are dealing with those diseases or those situations, they're quite often sampling diets. And so we ended up with quite a few people that were dealing with anorexia and bulimia, coming on to WildFit, not disclosing that to us because our medical check-in process that when we first started wasn't as good as it is now, but giving us feedback at the end that somewhere along the line it went away.
Lovely.
And I ended up speaking to a few of these people because I was, what do you mean it went away? I don't understand. We didn't treat it. We didn't ever talk about it. We didn't go through the therapy for it. What do you mean it went away? And they go, I don't know. It's just like, as I slowly stopped putting junk in and I slowly started putting good stuff in, I no longer had the need to starve myself, or I no longer had the need to vomit. It just went away. And so again, we have this weird chicken and egg situation where we think we have to treat those issues in a counseling way, in a psychological way. And I'm not saying we don't, I'm just saying that's our first port of call. But isn't it entirely possible that what we really first have to do is get that person's nutrition right? And then that will put them in a place of having healthier neurology, healthier psychology, which might then help them to overcome the challenge better.
Yeah. Yeah. What I find that in the industry of fitness, there are, and also with all the adverts, you know, and just everything that we see going on in life, there's such a large demographic of women that are really starving themselves. They're really undereating, like in a big way, but they think that skinny is pretty. They think it's almost like going back. I hate to date myself, but it's almost like going back in the 70s where every single model was like a stick. When I was a dancer, all of us ballerinas, we were all anorexic. Every one of us. It was normal. It's embarrassing to say, and no one admits it. No one.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is something I've been curious about for a long time, but I became a lot more than curious about it when I ended up with my own baby girl. You know, suddenly it became much more real to me. You know, the issue went from being an intellectual curiosity or pursuit to being, holy crap, I have to change something because I can't let her grow up in that world.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I was walking down the street in Stockholm one day, and you know, every country has their ideas of morality. Like, America is the weirdest country in the world. Like, you know, this is immoral, but we can have the most degrading porn in the world. Like, America is a funny country that way. You know, topless, not topless. Oh, but you can do that to her in the video. Like, but you know, when you get to Europe, you find that there's I think a better balance of that type of thing generally. And so they don't have the same hangups about nudity that we do in the North American world the same way. So I'm walking down the street with a friend of mine, and there's a full side of a building billboard, right? So we're talking about something that's probably the size of 5 billboards tall, and the width of this building, a whole mural style thing. And it's a woman putting on deodorant, and she's like technically gorgeous. You know, her shape is exactly the way it's supposed to be and all that stuff, according to, you know, whatever physicists figured out that women are supposed to look like they can't. You know, it's ridiculous. But she's putting on deodorant and there's a breast, and the breast has got to be 30 feet wide. I mean, and it's on the street. You know, and you'd never see something like this outside of Las Vegas. But you know, but here it is. And I'm walking along and I'm looking at this genetically unlikely woman who's been photographed by a magician with a camera, who's had makeup applied by an artist, who's then been digitally modified by another artist to create an impossible idea of beauty. And yet I can't not look. And then I turn to my friend Ingela, a woman, and I go, I need to admit something to you. I find that repugnant, but I can't not look at it. And she goes, you want to know what's really scary? Me too. Me too. She says it's incredibly beautiful to look at. We've been conditioned that that's now what some version of beauty is. And, you know, and so when I walk through an airport, and, you know, very often I disappear off into the outback of Africa somewhere, I'm gone. And when I'm gone, I'm not gone like, you know, like some people, it's like, do they have Wi-Fi here? I'm gone. Like, I'm gone. And then I might be gone for some weeks, and then I come back and I land in some European airport, and I walk in and I am assaulted by tobacco and perfume and pictures of genetically unlikely women altered by perfectionist artists to create this idea of what our women in the world are growing up and going, if I don't look like that, I'm imperfect. Oh my God. I swear, any photograph, in my opinion, any photograph that's had any level of processing beyond light exposure should be disclosed with a statement at the bottom that says, this is not a real woman. It's not real. This is not a real woman. Look, and if it's not been digitally altered and it's some, you know, perfect model waif, it should say, this is an incredibly unlikely woman. Like,
it's so, no, it's so true. It's so true. And which is reminding me now of the selfie world. And because you have a little girl. How old is your girl? Your baby
3.5.
girl? Okay. So these kids are like, they're like in this selfie, you know, world right now. And it's interesting because, you know, you see 101 photos or maybe even 1,000 of everyone with their children on Mother's Day. And I'll tell you what, thank goodness my son and I completely aligned. We don't do selfies. We don't throw things on there on social media. You know, half the people probably think I didn't see my son for Mother's Day, but who cares? You know, but it's crazy because everyone has that selfie going on, and it's all about image and what we're showing someone else. And I'm pretty much the opposite of that. I mean, really, who cares? And that's really kind of boils down to even with people that are not feeding themselves properly, whether they're overeating or undereating. It's really just about just taking control of self and loving yourself and just loving who you are exactly how you are, you know.
Let me ask you then, let me turn the interview back on you for a minute, because here's something I've noticed.
Okay.
I've noticed that the more, I don't know what the right phrase is here, but the more technically attractive a woman is, the more pressure she feels to be attractive. It's the weirdest thing. Like, I remember seeing this interview once with, the actress, I can't remember which one it was now, but one of the, you know, technically beautiful superhero type actresses. Mm-hmm. And in the interview, she said to David Letterman, I still remember, she said, he goes, it must be awfully nice, you know, just walking around looking like you. And she goes, no, it's really lonely. And I said, what do you mean? Or he said, what do you mean? And she goes, well, because men just don't walk up and talk to me. I'm alone all the time. I'm thinking after that interview, it probably got fixed. Right. But here's the thing. She said, Scarlett Johansson, it was Scarlett Johansson. And she said, he goes, yeah, but you're so beautiful. She goes, no, I'm not. Mm-hmm. I don't see myself as beautiful. And what I've noticed with the various friends that I've had and the partners that I've had over the years is that the more they fit into the stereotypical idea of beautiful, the more pressure they feel to get there. Whereas, you know, there are some women who's like, they just go, I'm just not that. So I'm not that fussed about it. But so I'm curious because you're pretty, or you're attractive in the traditional sense. You may be a beautiful woman separately, but you know what I'm talking, in the shallow sense, you're genetically, gifted. So how do you get to a place where you don't get caught in that rat race, where you don't let it get to you? What can I say to my little girl so she ends up feeling balanced like you do?
That's a good question. And thank you for the compliment. I'm taken back by that. To be honest with you, that was one of my big reasons, big problems that I had when, back in the day when I was 21 and anorexic, was that I looked in the mirror and I didn't see that. So when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see someone pretty. I didn't see someone that was slim. And even what I would say, it's really about just, I view my life through the lens of the soul, and that's been my big thing. And you know, it's a lot about what I write in Truth to Triumph. It's a big thing about, you know, when I speak and coach people, is that if we kind of take ourselves outside of, back to the film producing, if we take ourselves outside of this, you know, this body that houses the soul, if you will, and really kind of look down, then you could really see who you are really, you know, beyond all of the labels and beyond all of the roles that we play and judgments. Growing up, you know, I don't have a lot of, you know, I don't have 20 girlfriends from high school that they all get together. I look at these girls, and some of them might be live right now. They're all on Facebook and they're friends forever. And it warms my heart, you know, but I didn't really have that, you know, but truth be told, I didn't really have that upbringing where I could really go out and do things anyway. I had a very, you know, that's a whole nother podcast. So I really kind of missed out on that. And a lot of that could, you know, really have to do with also the way I felt about myself. So I don't really see that, you know, and if I do, like, you know, a live or a podcast, and I don't really have any makeup on except lipstick, and I'm like, but lately in the way I feel now is I totally want people to, not just women, but men as well. I love people to just embrace who they are, love who they are in this moment, no matter what is going on, you know, and just let go of the labels, let go of the judgment, and just love themselves. And I would teach my daughter the same thing.
Yeah, I like that, Lily. Look, I have two takes on this. Is that my little girl is incredibly cute. I mean, you know, she's just very, very cute. Like, we go, if we go places, people stop and look at her, you know, because she's got this, you know, when she was a baby, we could have subbed her in as the Gerber baby. She was just like that. And then as she's just been really cute. Now, you know, it's really tough as a parent to remind yourself not to like put a lot of focus. Oh, you're so pretty.
Yeah.
No, don't want that to be where she derives her value from. But then I have another problem, and we're going to go, you know, like this, we're going to go politically challenged here for a second. Okay. But the body acceptance movement, to me, it's just like politics. You go too far left, you lose me. You go too far right, you lose me. The nut bars at either end of the political spectrum need to move to Mars. That's what Elon Musk should do. Take them to Mars. Like those people at the edges. But I would say the same thing when it comes to this issue of body imagery. The idea that we shame women into this thinness or into this idea of some false beauty, this calorie restrictive starvation beauty system, is absolutely deplorable. But I would say that the other deplorable end of that spectrum is full-on body acceptance and going, I'm happy with who I am, despite the fact that I'm carrying an extra 80 pounds and I'm going to cost the healthcare system a whole ton of money, and I'm going to suffer, and my family's going to suffer. And then now I know somebody's going to write on my Instagram in a second or on your feed, he's fat shaming. And I'm not. I'm saying, hold on a second. Anybody who's overweight like that, it's not their fault. I am absolutely clear that it's not their fault. It is the food industry's fault.
100%.
But answering it with food acceptance, with body acceptance as the answer, I am what I am, and I'm like body positive. Body positive. You know what's body positive is being in a place where your heart is not being strained by your health conditions. That's body positive, I think. And so we do have to find a balance between putting these unfair expectations at one end, but just letting it all go at the other.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. What I was really gearing toward more was looking from a different lens. So not looking at the body and just accepting the reality of the essence of who you are that this body is carrying. Because then once you really love that in here, not the one that's 80 pounds overweight and not the one that's perfectly, you know, technically in a perfect shape, but does not see it, but looking at from the lens of the soul, of the heart. This is who I am, you know, without the body. That's the part that I suggest to people to start to learn to know and love. Then once that love is real, then you really start to care about your body. Then you eat or you not eat, and you choose different things to eat. And that's called acting out in self-love, but in the physical. Yeah. Right? So it's kind of like an integration.
There's that expression, you know, that we're just spiritual beings here having a physical experience. But my friend Jeffrey Allen, he says he goes, your spirit isn't inside your body. Your body is inside your spirit. And so one way or the other, I think that if we can create that separation where we can take a look and go, there's me, and then there's this body that I use to get around in this physical world with. Well, I am amazed that people will take better cares of the car than they will of this other physical body, which they cannot trade in. It's a lot easier if you do as you just said, look at it through the lens of the soul. I am me, and my body is my body. And so I want to take care of my body because it's an asset, and I want it to appreciate.
Yeah, it's so true. When I coach people, the first thing I say, instead of how are you, I always say, how's your heart today? And because that's what we're looking at. How's your heart today? Because let's just start from there. That's like, let's start there and then go on. Segue. Speaking of the physical, alcohol. What can you tell us about that? Damaging, okay, in moderation, and don't sugarcoat it. Pardon the pun, but don't sugarcoat it. I want truth.
Look,
the reason I'm asking is because I have seen so many posts in the past 2 or 3, since the pandemic, where everyone is just starting these 2 p.m. pouring cocktails, and I'm like, okay, so let's discuss.
Let's talk about alcohol. So I want to like disclaim everything first by saying that I don't have alcohol, and I haven't had alcohol for 30 years. I had my last drink one night in the little town of Prince George, British Columbia. I drank enough that night that I woke up with a hangover and memories I didn't want to have. And I'm the one guy who made that deal with God. Like when the whole thing's done after Armageddon, I'm the one who's going to be standing, because I'm the one guy who said to God, if you just help me feel better, I'll stop drinking. I'm the one guy who kept that promise. And because I know a few of my friends have made that promise multiple times, and they and God are going to have to reconcile that one day. But no doubt. So I disclaim. What's that?
I said no doubt.
Yeah. So I'll disclaim my views of alcohol as somebody who doesn't consume alcohol. So, but I do not have judgment for people who, drink occasional alcohol or what have you. I think there are, alcohol is like anything. It's like television or video games or some drugs for that matter, that I think I'm not so judgmental. I'll say this, that if I was president of a country and I was told that I absolutely had to ban either alcohol or marijuana, I would ban alcohol over marijuana. I would ban it all day over marijuana. I just would. I feel that marijuana has its potential dangers, but it's like, we're talking several orders of magnitude less dangerous than alcohol, as far as I can tell. When we look at the numbers around child abuse and spousal abuse and all the things that alcohol and, drunk driving and all the crazy stuff that alcohol contributes to, I don't think it's generally good for our society. But I also do believe in liberty, and I believe in people having their right to choose. And so I think that the way people should be looking at it is really simple. This is the rule as far as I'm concerned. Are you using alcohol, or is it using you? And that's it. That's it. So my rule with those types of things is really simple. It's like, if I did drink, I don't, but if I did, I wouldn't one night be sitting here going, I feel really crappy, I'm going to have a drink. The way I might be willing to do it is, I'm feeling really great, I'm going to go have a drink with my friends. I'm using it to have fun with, or what have you. Now, funny note on that is that a very good friend of mine at the time, a guy named Ryan, and I, we quit drinking 10 years apart from each other. I quit when I was 21, he quit when he was 31, and we're at the same age. So when we're both now 35, we go out with our friends, and I'm dancing, I'm having a good time, I'm rocking down, I let my hair down, and he's standing in the corner. And the reason is that because I quit drinking so young, I learned to depress my inhibitions on my own. And he learned to depress his inhibitions only with the crutch of alcohol. And so first, is alcohol using you, or are you using it? And then the second one is, are you using it functionally? Are you using it in a functional way? And I'll share with you, this is really like, look, my dad nearly ended his life several times because of alcohol. My brother was in recovery before he was legally of age to buy alcohol. Like, alcohol was devastating in our family. And in my case, it wasn't. And one of the reasons it wasn't is I had the craziest thing happen. I read the book "No One Here Gets Out Alive," which is a biographical history of the Jim Morrison and the Doors. Jim Morrison, of course, one of the founding members of the 27 Club, which for people who don't know, the 27 Club means that he was dead at 27, which is entirely too young to go, especially when you're him. I mean, just the picture of amazing, intelligent, charismatic in every possible way. Why is he dead at 27? Well, he's dead at 27. Here's why. He was terrified of singing in public. And when he and the Doors would first perform at the Whiskey A Go-Go on the Sunset Strip, he would often go on stage and face his back to the audience because he couldn't handle it. And, they found out that if they got a couple drinks into him, then he would loosen up. And by the end of the show, he'd be a full showman because he'd had alcohol and everything would be fine. And that led to Dead in a Bathtub. And so here's what's really crazy. When I was about 18 years old, some friends of mine had a quite successful band. By successful, what I mean is they were making money and they were performing every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. Like they were a working band. They weren't a recorded band, but they were a working band. And then they lost their lead singer to a recording contract. So now he's gone off and he's got a national recording contract and they don't have a singer. So they come to me and they go, "You got to come sing for the band." They go, "You're a good looking guy. You got to have," first of all, which I didn't agree with at all. I had my own self-esteem issues to deal with, but I had the long hair for the right kind of music. I mean, I was the guy they wanted as the front man for the band. And I was terrified of public speaking. And the only thing more terrifying for me than public speaking was singing. And so they talked me into coming down to their studio, and they had a full professional studio set up. I mean, it was incredible because they wanted to become a recording band. And I said to the guy, "Why on earth do you think I can sing?" And he goes, "Because you sing at all the parties." And I go, "No, I don't." And he goes, "You do all the time." He said, "I don't know anybody else who can do Sweet Child of Mine note for note all the way through the song. Nobody can do that. You got it." And I'm like, no, that's never happened. And he goes, "Yeah, it does." So we go into the recording studio and he goes, "Why don't you just try to lay down a track?" And I can't do it. I can't get anything out of my voice. And he goes, "Well, why do you do it at the party so easily?" And I go, "I don't know. I guess once I've been drinking." And he goes, "Why don't we go get a couple of beers and we'll come back and lay down a track?" And in that moment, I'm not kidding you, Jim Morrison saved my life. In that moment, I suddenly thought about Jim Morrison, Dead in a Bathtub. And I chose not to use alcohol as a crutch. I chose not to. And now, would my life have been completely different if maybe I figured out a way to get over my fears and sang for a band back then? Whatever. I don't have any regrets about that because it would never have worked. Look, I have something on stage. I've got it. I enjoy travel. I've spoken in 25 countries around the world. I've got some stage charisma. Arguably, I had it at 18, and arguably, I could have been quite a successful singer. But if I used alcohol to get there, I'd have been dead in a bathtub at 27.
Wow. Yeah.
Not a big fan of alcohol.
That's a powerful story and analogy. That's amazing. Yeah. So then, and people go, toward it for, their own reasons. So what would you say to those listeners who struggle to believe that they are born perfect and that they deserve to be happy?
There's so many different ways to approach that conversation, and it's often very contextual. It depends a lot on the person. I've done a lot of work with people in multiple countries around the world from different cultures that have arrived at the conclusion that they are somehow less than worthy for a variety of different reasons. It's incredible. But, one way that I look at it is we're just so statistically unlikely. Your father produced 300 million sperm and one made it. 1 out of 300 million. By the way, that's the same odds of becoming president of the United States. 1 out of 300 million. Now, it seems like the last American election was a bit like a test tube. We just randomly picked 2 out of the 300 million. I don't know what happened there. But if we think about it like this, if it's 1 out of 300 million, then let's do another bit of math. You had 2 parents, 4 grandparents. And if we carry on with that math all the way back, at 10 generations ago, you had about 2,000 great-great-great-grandparents. And if we take it back another 10 generations, you had 1 million. You had 1 million ancestors, each one of whom had to produce 300 million sperm. Like, you are so incredibly unlikely. And there's not a single particle in you that didn't once live inside a star. And the odds of them all being from the same star are pretty damn low. Like, you are unlikely. And so that in itself to me is evidence that you're worthy.
Yeah.
That is right there. Evidence that you're worthy. The fact that you're here, self-worth is self-evident.
Yes.
And everything else that damages that is a belief that you've accepted from somewhere because of a rule probably made before you were 12 years old.
Yeah.
And so that's where we start going back and saying, like, what did our parents say? And by the way, I had some of those. My dad, very funny guy. He had a very good sense of humor. And, but the one problem is that children don't really understand sarcasm. And so my dad, I look like my mom. I've got the French darker, dark eyes and all that stuff. And my brother looks more like my dad, the more somewhere between Brad Pitt and Paul Newman kind of thing going on. And so my dad would introduce us as kids in a really sweet, playful way. He would say, here's my son, Eric, and here's my son, Nick, the good looking one. Okay. What he means is he looks like me. I'm saying he's the good looking one. Everybody knows that he doesn't mean it, except for his children, because they don't understand sarcasm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I grew up with the literal understanding that my brother is the good looking one. And I am the ugly one that came from the homely Dutch side of our family. And I lived with that belief until I was in my mid-30s. So first, your existence is proof of your self-worth, just the unlikeliness of us all. Then what we have to do is try to clean up where somebody sold us on the idea that we're somehow less, that we're somehow less. And it's difficult because one of the things we all want as humans is to excel. We all want to be important. We all want to be significant within our social constructs. And so one of the ways that we figure that out is that we look up to people. And this is so supposed to be so important. You see, we have these things called mirror neurons. And so when you look up to somebody with admiration, you activate your mirror neurons and they start to try to model that person's behavior. So you don't even have to learn from them consciously. You can learn a huge amount from somebody just by admiring them. The stronger your admiration for them, the more your unconscious mind goes, I'll be like them, I'll be like them, I'll be like them. But the problem is we've now screwed up what we admire. And our kids are growing up admiring rap stars that are talking about shooting cops. And our kids have grown up admiring sports stars that are cheating and diving on the football field. Like, our kids are admiring the wrong people. Their mirror neurons are now trying to copy the wrong people. And boom, self-esteem is one of the victims of this whole problem. So I think one of the things that we can do with our kids is really let them know who we really admire. I admire Abraham Lincoln. I admire Nelson Mandela. I admire Michael Faraday. I admire Viktor Frankl. And I think if we can talk to our kids about how they choose who they admire, on one level you might go, no, but if they admire the Kardashians, it's easier. It's easier, not such a high bar to look up to, No, that's not easier. It's harder. If we admire somebody like Nelson Mandela, then we get to talk about stoicism and we get to talk about forgiveness and generosity. We get to model traits that might make us better people, I think.
Yes. I'm so happy you said this. I completely align with what you're saying. My son is 22 and I raised him, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And, I would take out, like the dictionary, the definition of influence of a French friend is to influence.
Yeah.
And I was that single mom that said, I don't think I want you hanging out with that boy. Why, Mom? You say to love everyone. I said, I'm not saying I don't love him. I'm saying, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. I want you to raise the bar. I want you to start to think or feel or suspect who, is really, really admirable to you. And I want you to achieve that or to work toward that. And those are the people that you want to hang out with. Right. But always that was like one of the things, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And I love that. I love that also piece about what we're seeing in ourselves and who we're looking at. The big thing for me is that I like people to feel that they are so much bigger than they think they are. They are so much more than they think, that they are. We have to, but as long as we're seeing that, we can aim to be here, right? And so when your daughter sees you admiring, or talking about the people that you look up to, or the people that, maybe mentored you, even if it was just with a book, right? That's big.
Mm.
That's totally big. And I wanted to quickly segue into something that I heard you say about seasonal fluctuation, because you talk about that regarding food, which I love. And because I see life situations as seasonal fluctuation in human behavior as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think yeah, absolutely. There's change is change, and
yeah, like what we're going through right now, let's say.
And it's the only constant. That's it. That's it. Change is the only constant. Here we are. And so, but the beautiful thing is that there are patterns, there are patterns. And so those patterns allow us to treat things as though they're seasons. So right now we're in this, shock winter all of a sudden economically. We were in summer and we skipped fall. We just, well, I wouldn't even say that. We had a long fall as well, a long reaping. There was lots of reaping going on, very, 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 rich time that we'd been going in. And then suddenly, boom, fall came to an end. And now here we are in economic winter. But guess what? Not everybody is.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things for us to get is that we have these larger macro seasons where, there's the global economy running through its various seasons. But I will tell you, I'm pretty damn sure that during the Great Depression, there were people sitting around swimming pools drinking drinks out of umbrella glasses. What I'm saying? There were people who were not in that economy, and it'll happen this time as well. There were people who will not be. When the 2008 crash happened, I didn't even notice. I had just sold my company. It didn't even affect me. But this time it does affect me. I've got employees, but that doesn't mean I have to fully participate. But if I don't understand the season, then I might not know to change my behavior. Right. And so I think that we have the economic seasons to deal with. Then we have our life seasons, and I've always regarded, it's kind of like, and I can't speak to women. Women, I think, have different life seasons. I really like Alison Armstrong's work on that type of thing relative to women. I just speak for a man here, is that I feel like you go into this phase of you're a little boy, and then you experiment with knighthood through your teens, and that's the competition days, and you go through this whole thing, and then if you really handle knighthood well, you might make it to prince status. And that's where you do what you should be doing. It's where you start to live into yourself, into your conscious mind, where you don't live with a lot of regret because you don't do a lot of things that you regret. And that's where you move into prince time. And all of this time is for developing your experience as a person. And what's really fascinating is that if you get that that's true, then there's no failure. That means if you start a business in your 30s and you go bankrupt, you didn't fail. That was part of your princely duty to learn about the world. You were meant to do that. And then you get to a stage, and I figure it's about 50, where you move into where you really start to take your place in the world as a proper knight or a king or a or a lord or whatever it is, where you're really supposed to start giving your wisdom back to the world. And by the way, some of the very most successful entrepreneurs in the world hit their stride, male and female, in their 50s, because they started to give back the wisdom that they generated. And so then you've got these like economic seasons, then you got life stage seasons, and then there's annual, and even monthly seasons. I said to my wife once, I've always told my friends, I see friends that get married, get engaged after they've been together for like 6-8 weeks. And I'm always like, I don't know. I figure that you should be together for at least a year before you do that. And if you're going to get engaged faster than that, the engagement should be long. Like, you want to know a person through all 4 seasons. Because people are different in winter than they are in summer. They just are. They are different people. And so, before you get married, you want to know the person through all 4 seasons. But then you get into other situations where what if the seasons were altered? Like, what I mean by that is if you're in one phase of your life in the beginning of a relationship and then your life goes through another wholesale change, guess what? The seasons are changing. And you gotta, if you don't address that stuff, if you don't notice that, then yeah. So I think seasons apply on layer upon layer upon layer, right down to you got to eat seasonally, and you got to make sure that your body gets like the idea of the recommended daily allowance is it's one of the most incredible myths of the food and diet industry. That doesn't work. There should be a recommended annual allowance. Hey, in the year you should do this. In a month you should do this. The only thing you need daily is air and water.
Yeah, I totally agree. personally, I feel so blessed that we can actually be in this journey in this season together where, you and I kind of met, and this kind of, kind of like a divine arrangement, or call it what you will, but it's really this season where the timing was right. And I am in my 50s. I won't say how old I am, but it's all about cycles in life as well, right? And so as you become more seasoned in life, then so here we are. So I'm excited that our paths have intersected, if you will, to be right here. So what was that light bulb for you when, that light bulb moment for you when you really decided to pivot into the coaching and the speaking and even creating WildFit?
Let me address one thing just as a pre-frame before going into that answer. I had a big breakthrough about something this last month because I only turned 50 in March. So, I just got crossover, right? And,
happy birthday.
Thanks very much. I was one of the very first pandemic birthdays. I was on the 18th of March and I was having a birthday by myself. Now many people have done it, but I was like totally by myself for my birthday. And how humans are, round number. I was by myself for a round number birthday. It's catastrophic. It was actually quite nice. But one of the things I realized was when I was 20, it was the first time I started to feel a little old. Like, I'm 20, I'm going to be responsible for myself. But I realized what I was really most afraid of is what 30 was going to be like. And then I got to 30 and I realized I was really afraid of my 40s. God, that's old, man. Holy 40s. That's old. That's some old stuff at 40. But I really enjoyed my 30s a lot. I liked my 30s. I rocked my 30s. And then I got into my 40s and I suddenly became really terrified of my 50s. It was just the 50s. Oh, that's ancient. Yeah. But I loved my 40s, man. I rocked the 40s. The roaring 40s, it was outstanding for me. And now I'm 50 and I'm going, I actually love being 50. I'm a little freaked out about my 60s.
Right. No, I know.
But you know what my friends in their 60s and 70s are telling me? It's awesome. Take care of your body, and it's awesome.
It's so true.
So with that, yeah. With that, what turned the corner was, when I was a kid, I couldn't afford to go to university. It's just a weird quirk of things. I couldn't go. So I just jumped into the workforce and started working, and I got involved in a sales company, and, that kind of introduced me to, say, professional speaking and motivational speakers and that kind of stuff. And I wasn't all that impressed, frankly. No desire to do that. A, I was terrified of public speaking, and B, they were all really good at coming and making you feel good, but nothing ever changed, right? I was like, oh yeah, great. Everybody feels good to now, but tomorrow they're going to, and then a couple of things did change. I went to a Tony Robbins seminar in my early 20s, and I changed. As a person, I changed. I changed a lot. And I was like, oh, that's not just speaking, that's transformation. So then I became really fascinated and curious about transformation. Like what drives human behavior? I took all the stuff that I got as a kid, as a practical psychologist growing up in chaos, and I brought that forward and said, wow, this is fascinating. This means that when I coach somebody on business, I don't just have to share the ideas with them. I can share the ideas with them in a way that they will actually integrate them. And that's fascinating to me. And so I was working on that stuff for years as kind of a hobby and a thought process. And I was doing quite a lot of mentoring and coaching. I was a coach for our mentor for the Prince's Trust in the United Kingdom for young entrepreneurs, and really enjoying all that. And then, as happens so many times, I just got the weird random phone call. I got this phone call from a guy named Mitch, and he's like, would you come and teach business at Tony Robbins Business Mastery seminars? And I know sometimes I tell that story now and people go, well, yeah, of course you got that invite. You're good at what you do. No. At that stage of my life, I hadn't been on stage anywhere for 3 years. It was basically like calling up a go-kart racer and saying, hey, could you come do the Grand Prix? Could you drive a Formula One car for us for the day?
Right.
Yeah, it was insane. And of course the right thing to do would have been to say no. Because if I fell down, if I crash the car at that, I'm never going to get another shot. But then I thought, hell, I might not get another shot anyway. So I said yes. And I had 11 days to prepare. And I went off to Fiji and I nailed it. And I nailed it really well. And I'll tell you one of the moments, and this is something everybody, man, this might be the most important thing I say all day today. I mean this. We have to expand our comfort zone with what we're allowed, with what we will allow into our lives. We have to expand our comfort zone with what we're willing to allow into our lives. Because you see, our beliefs will block things like that. And so as we were on the plane into Fiji, the plane's coming down into Fiji. And I think to myself, Jesus, this is big. Like if I really do well, maybe they'll call me again. This is a big opportunity. I mean, I'm about to do an event with Tony. And by the way, it's a private event, a private business mastery event. Me and Tony are the only two speakers. So like this is a unique opportunity. Unique is a very overused word. This is a unique opportunity, as in one of a kind. And so as the plane's coming down, if I nail this, if I really nail this, then you know what? They might call me again. And then as the plane touched down, I thought, you limiting fool. You don't want to get on the list. You want to become the list. You want to do this so well that they don't call you when they have a problem. They call you when they don't have a problem. And as a result of that one changed thought, I remapped my talk and I created a series of goals, one of which was to keep Tony in the room for a 3.5-hour presentation that was being punctuated every second sentence in Chinese, not live translation, but stage translation. And I kept Tony in the room for 3.5 hours, laughing away at the back of the room. And then he booked me for 1.5 years. And I fell so in love with teaching and sharing that I got to move into my giving backstage about 6 years earlier than I probably would have. And it's been the most gratifying experience of my life. And that's what gave birth to WildFit. It's what gave birth to Business Freedom and Speaker Nation. That opportunity turned into everything I'm doing today. Wow.
And talk about timing. That is powerful. That you were limiting. It's almost like sometimes like we're not dreaming large enough, right? Or you were limiting, what if you were kind of limiting yourself. That's powerful and inspiring to me. I mean, I'm 57. I'll be 58 in October, and
you really had me curious. You have a 22-year-old son, and you tell me you're in your 50s. You're like, at the risk of whatever, you're carrying it incredibly well. You're clearly taking care of your body, and I'm very happy for you.
Yeah, because it's certainly not from lack of a stressful life, from no stress in my life, or I've had a lot of things going on. So yeah, taking care of myself. So, and speaking of which, I would love to, Eric, would you come back again and we can talk more about WildFit program as well?
Absolutely. Let's make it happen. If you just reach out to Kelsey, she'll rebook. I'd love to do it. Okay, great. Last question. And I don't know if this is original or unique, as you put it, but what is you've been giving back, you've been doing a lot. There's everything you've been doing. But what is the footprint that you wish to leave on this planet? It's funny. I just did an interview yesterday, and somebody asked me how I wanted to be remembered. They said, what would you want them to say during your eulogy? And I want them to go, "Where is he?" Like, oh, he hasn't died yet. There's no eulogy. I still want to be around for a while. But I think if I really think about it, I'm not really that concerned about legacy in the traditional sense. I don't need a monument and that kind of stuff. I think for me, every single time somebody writes to me and says, "You've improved the quality of my life," whether it's because I help them transform their relationship with food, or I help them find their voice and get it out in the world, or I help them build a really solid business, or I help them in any other way. Like every time, and I get letters, like no kidding, every day, minimum every day, many a day. I'm so grateful that I get to expand. I read them, by the way. I mean, I really do. Like I make the time every day to go through them. And when somebody writes to me and says, "Hey, my life is immeasurably easier, more fun, more gratifying, more rewarding because of my time with you," then that's it. There's the footprint. And obviously the more people I can do that for, the greater it is. But I won't do that to the detriment of my own quality of life. And, so there's the balance.
Yeah, that's great. Eric, please tell me how, you've supported me here. How can I support you? How can our listeners support you?
Well, I'll tell you what, if anybody is looking at they want to take off what they call, I've heard this new expression, the COVID-15, the 15 pounds everybody's putting under in COVID. If anybody wants to handle the COVID-15, if they want to turn around some of the, some of the food stuff that's happened over the last, like here's one of the problems. Anything you do for 15 to 21 days in a row becomes a habit, both chemically and neurologically in your system. And so a lot of people have been doing things for the last 15 days, particularly around food. They're going to have a hard time breaking those habits when the lockdown's over. And so anybody who wants to revisit their relationship with food and change your health trajectory, go to getwildfit.com/reset. And we have a 14-day reset that will dive into your psychology around food, and it will change your life. It will. And then you might decide to do more with us afterward, and that'd be great. And in the meantime, hey, come find me on Instagram. Instagram is my last foothold where I personally manage my social media. And I take time every week to actually reply to people. And I can't promise to get to everybody, but it is me. If you get a response, it's not an intern, it's me. And so come and find me at Eric Edmeades on Instagram.
Amazing, amazing. This was Eric Edmeades. With me, your host, Lily Sanders. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it 5 stars and subscribe for more powerful conversations in Beyond the Current Situation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Eric. God bless.